there's kind of this accepted, this is just what you deal with. So you have terrible cramps, you feel sick, you feel awful. That's part of being a young woman. So congratulations. And then you grow up, and then pregnancy and all of that goes along with it. And like, yay for you, you had a baby. So that's what you get. And then, you start perimenopause and menopause, and it's like, now deal with that. And I just found this conversation so refreshing because so much of what you're saying is we have ways that we can help you deal with that. There's actually science and medicine and a lot of things that we can do to improve the lives of people with uterus.
Welcome back to the Parenting Pair podcast. I'm Dr. Annalise Caron.
And I'm Dr. Suzanne Allen.
And today we are welcoming back Dr. Sophia Yen. She is a pediatric and adolescent medicine specialist who was on our podcast last week. If you missed our podcast last week, we strongly encourage you to go back and listen because she gave us really a full education on the possibility and the health benefits and the public health benefits of making period optional by using the birth control pill or other birth control options. It was a really interesting discussion. So if you missed that, please go back and check it out. She is uber qualified, MIT grad. She went to UCFS. She has a master's of public health from UC Berkeley. We are really thrilled to have her here today. She also co-founded the Silver Ribbon Campaign to Trust Women and SheHeroes.org. And she's the co-founder of Pandia Health, which is all about making birth control more accessible to everyone. And so since she was kind enough to be here today, we thought that we would take some listener questions. We requested through Instagram just people to send in any questions they would have of an adolescent medicine physician. And we got sort of a full cadre of possibilities, but we're going to start just sort of at the basic ones that I think can bring parents some real anxiety, along the way if things, are going in a way you don't expect. So the first sort of grouping of questions we got were really just kind of, could you speak to briefly, just what are the typical ages for girls and boys to enter puberty? When is quote unquote too early? And when is maybe quote unquote too late or you should be concerned?
Yes. So the general range that we are all tested on our national board, so it applies to the United States of America based on general statistics and history, is to start puberty at age 8 or is before that is too early. And then after 13 is too late. And starting puberty doesn't mean your period. It means breast development. So normally flat and then a little nubbin, we call them buds, are at 8 or 13. And if you don't get your periods within 2 years of getting your breast development, then that is delayed, menarche being your first period. For young men, 9 to 14. And the first growth is their testicles. And so it's a volume of their testicles and they get slightly larger. And that is the first sign of puberty in young men. There's also adrenarche, which is the beginning of the male kind of hormones or just, the stinkiness, the hairiness, that situation. And that is similar as well. What you may have heard is that kids are hitting puberty earlier. And it really has only moved about 6 months. And what it is nutrition is what we believe, is that we know from my experience with eating disorder patients and just in general that when you hit 100 pounds or 22% body fat, for those of us with uteruses, born with uteri, you will get your period. But you have to maintain that consistently. So if you're an athlete, if you have an eating disorder, if you're a small Asian friend, like my friend, she always teetered around 100 pounds. And so her periods would come and go. She just needed to get to that 22% body fat or 100 pounds. And so if, as you all know, we're having an epidemic of obesity in the United States, where about 66% of people in general are overweight or obese, then you're going to hit that 100 pounds. You're going to hit that 22% body fat earlier.
Mm-hmm. Question, and I definitely will follow up with some questions about obesity and weight and concerns. But sticking with sort of the onset of puberty, if you are in that group that maybe as a parent you're concerned that you're seeing things, quote unquote, before that age 8 or age 9 mark, what is a parent to do? What is there something to do?
Oh, yes, there is. So please see your doctor. And if your doctor agrees, then they will send you to an endocrinologist. And there are medications that they can do to hold off the puberty. And the reason you want to hold off the puberty is once you start that process, for those of us, again, with uteruses, 2 years after you get your period, then you no longer grow in height. And so if you have puberty too early, you will be short. Same thing, male or female. And then also just, there are negative social consequences. Young women who bloom earlier get unwanted attention, sexual harassment, other stuff like that. Interestingly enough, young boys who not bloom earlier, but who are older, that's why there's this whole red shirting phenomenon.
Right.
That, boys are less socially apt. And so if they're the older group of their bunch, they're more like, and will become a leader of the group. But that's not saying you want premature puberty. That's just saying why people redshirt. So if you have premature puberty, see a doctor. We have drugs.
And if you're on the other end of that, right? If you're someone who maybe, is older than that 8 to 13 range or 15, when is it that, say for a girl or a boy, if things aren't developing or a period isn't coming, when does a parent know to be concerned about that?
So if you see the breast development or ask your young person about a breast development and they don't get their periods within 2 years, please see a doctor, because there could be something structurally wrong, like the uterus is blocked or bifid uterus, or there might be something genetically wrong. They might have something called Kallman syndrome, or they might be XXY, or they might be Klinefelters. There's all sorts of things you all don't need to know. Just please see
a doctor.
Physician. And same thing with young men, though I just went to a lecture about delayed puberty in young men. If it runs in your family, then it's probably okay if everyone in your family is a late bloomer. But if this is the first late bloomer in your family, please get that checked out. It could be thyroid, it could be a tumor, it could be all sorts of things. Yeah. But anything that's off normal, don't be afraid to ask your doctor.
Very good. Mm-hmm. Very good.
I think we've entered a time which is there's a lot of good in that there's more information being shared, more open information. And sometimes that is difficult for parents because there's a lot of information being shared and it's not all vetted online. And so I'm just curious if you have seen a difference in kind of puberty or the development of how young people, the impact of that with kind of social media or information that's shared out there. I think for parents, it's always hard, right? Because everything feels the same yet different. And so we can remember our experiences, right? But our kids are growing up in a totally different world than we were. Are there things parents should know about what puberty might be like now for young people?
I think that, social media can be bad and social media can be good. People need to be aware that not all doctors are the same. There are naturopathic doctors, there are chiropractor doctors, there are eye doctors, there are pediatricians, there's OB-GYNs. So be careful when somebody says they're a doctor, they could be a PhD, which is a researcher and not somebody that's ever seen patients or prescribed drugs, or they could be a PhD psychologist who sees lots of patients. So it's important to know what is that title when you are consuming and where are they from? And are they trying to sell you a supplement? Know that supplements are not FDA tested, and that they've done research showing that like 30% of supplements had stuff in it that wasn't supposed to be in it. But they've also done research showing, the one that blew my mind is a bottle of St. John's wort that said 100 milligrams. And in that same bottle, I would understand different batches, but even then, same bottle had 0 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams because not FDA tested. And there are some tested, more trustworthy brands, but just know legally does not have to be FDA tested or approved, and cannot be FDA tested or approved because it's just not under their purview to do that. So That I would say. And then the internet, my father's joke, the number one thing on the internet is porn. And that, unfortunately, I think has shaped one gender's perception of sex, and, choking and violence and shaved body parts. That is a big thing. I think the hair is there for a reason, because who likes razor burn? Razor burn is not. Who likes ingrown hairs down there?
Right.
So I do believe if you like to trim because in a swimsuit is not looking great, sure. But like to cut it all off all the time is unnecessary. And violence with sex, I don't think is ever a good thing. And porn just has unrealistic expectations.
100%. I think there is a way when it's right, when the computer's right there in your pocket and you can be alone in your bedroom, that it feels private, but you can keep getting this information that might not be, your cultural value, your family's values. It might not be. I've always said that I think in general, this is in overestimation, but in the US, I think we do a pretty good job of explaining, how babies are made, right? Like what sort of the functionality of sex, but the importance of discussing intimacy and, not that your child's values around sex have to be your values around sex, but it is helpful to have those discussions about what, has made, positive sexual interactions for an adult, and sharing respect, consent,
caring for someone's body, caring for your own body.
Right. And what are the values and the experience you have that you can inform your kids? Because otherwise, if we don't have those conversations, kids are alone, looking at porn or, in ways that has a lot of violence and isn't, representative of regular sex. So very, very good point. I'm going to shift here because of, your expertise just with the age range and interest in obesity, with the same sort of question around, I think parents have a lot of concerns about saying the wrong thing, around, particularly for girls with regard to their weight. And so I guess it's a twofold question. When should parents worry about, their child's weight, or how should they think about that, or what are helpful ways to think about that? And then, because there is normal weight gain during puberty that we would expect to see, that's an adjustment for kids and maybe their families, if that's a thing. But when should parents worry or seek help, and how best what was the best language to use to sort of talk around these issues with your, let's say, tween or teenager?
Yes. So I've worked with eating disorder patients. I work in a weight clinic, healthy lifestyles clinic. The focus, is not so much on the number. The focus is more on healthy lifestyle. You should gain weight, but you should also gain height during puberty and growth. And if you're purely gaining weight and no height, then that could be an endocrine problem, but that could also just be, you shouldn't gain more weight than you gain height. It should be proportional. And pediatrics, we have our growth curves, and you should not be crossing growth curve percentiles. You pretty much should track your whole life at the same percentile. The first 2 years is crazy because my daughter, I call it, was born Jabba the Hutt. And then she found her, whatever. And part of it was because I ate a lot of cupcakes during breastfeeding, who knows, whatever. But eventually they'll find their growth curve around 2 to 4, and they should stick to that growth curve unless they're underfed, and then in which case we should get them to the right growth curve.
Sure.
And certainly you could have obesity starting at age 2, and then we need to get you down to, we want most people under the 85th percentile for age and gender. And so we have the weight growth curve, but we have the body mass index, which adjusts for height. And certainly Schwarzenegger, if you all don't know, he was governor of California, and this muscle builder, and at his prime with all muscle had a body mass index of 45. So BMI is just a screen. If you have a high BMI, then we ask, what are you eating? A 24-hour recall. What did you eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner? Any snacks? Any liquid calories? And if that's unhealthy, then that needs to be dealt with. If you are all muscle and you're eating really healthy, then I don't really care what your weight is, and I don't care what your BMI is. So really, it's if they're crossing percentiles, which you will know, you can go online, punch it in, or you can see your physician, then that is of concern. If you're noticing a change from, this to this, we call it, I think, pear to apple, that if they're losing their waist, if their pants are getting tighter, that kind of situation, then that is something to be concerned. The goal of a parent is to provide healthy options and to role model that when we have patients in our obesity clinic, weight management clinic, it's a family intervention. It's not just Sophia, the patient's problem. It's the whole family's problem. So in general, everybody knows sodas are not healthy. As adolescent medicine, we're about risk reduction rather than risk elimination. So diet soda, fine, as much as you want. And everybody's like, what about cancer from the artificial blah, blah, blah? The cancer has really only been shown in rats where we fed them the equivalent of a swimming pool. So if you are drinking a swimming pool worth of diet soda, okay, but most people are not drinking a swimming pool worth of diet soda. And then how to get to diet soda. When I first tried diet soda, I was like, disgusting, and so you may want to mix your way there. Buy 2 liters and mix for the first week, 25% diet, 75% regular. The week after, 50-50. The week after that, 75% diet, 25% regular. And by week 4, you're at 100% diet. But I've also just, as a plug, I tried Coke Zero, and I'm like, this is good stuff. So you may be able to just go straight over to diet. Joy, man.
You heard it here. Zero.
No, what I really love about this suggestion, I have to say, I don't think I've ever heard a physician really sort of honor the possibility that diet soda is an okay thing. It's certainly better than the straight sugar because of all the chemicals or because of the concerns around that. But I do think kind of having that attitude also meets the adolescent where they are, right? If you just say, well, you can only drink water and black tea, they're going to be like, you're right. But you're kind of meeting them where they are. Like, let's do this a quarter. I get it, but imagine how many teaspoons of sugar that is that you're getting rid of. Like, how cool. Let's go do it. That feels so much more approachable to me.
Yeah. And so the example I give is if you have a glass of whole milk, you have a glass of lemonade, and then soda, that's a pound a week you're gaining just from those liquid calories. So if you can take that whole milk to 2% or non-fat, if you take that lemonade and switch it to lemonade with Splenda, or, I know in the South they have sweet iced tea, do it with stevia, do it with Splenda, do it with whatever sugar, monk fruit, sugar substitute that you like. And then diet soda, you can lose a pound a week. Not a pound a month, just not a pound a day, but like a pound a week. If you normally drink 3 caloric drinks, or you do a super gulp, which is like big gulp, 3 of those to begin with, and you switch that to diet, you could lose a pound a week. The other one that I really like, 2 other ones. One is they've shown if you turn off your screens after 2 hours, no diet, no exercise intervention, just turn off your, phone, blah, blah, blah. After 2 hours, not for homework. Homework you can do as much as you want. You lose weight. That's nice. And then a lot of kids are stressed out in high school. They don't get enough sleep. You get 1 hour extra sleep. When you're missing it, you lose weight. I was like, what a great way to lose weight. Sleep extra, lose weight in my sleep, literally. And so for teenagers, if you can't fit it in at night, then you can have a 1 hour nap in the afternoon, but no more than 1 hour because then it'll mess up your whole sleep schedule. But 1 hour nap is okay. The other tip, I just got to keep throwing all my tips out, is don't go to sleep within 2 hours of eating something. So don't, like, carbo coma. I eat carbs, and we should cut down our carbs in general, not to 0, but less. And then I want to go to sleep. So if you have a midnight snack, you're staying up till 2 a.m. If you're feeling snacky at 10 p.m., you want to stay up till midnight or you want to go to sleep. And so it's like sleep, eat.
Yeah.
But do not go to sleep within 2 hours of eating anything. And then any snack you have, no 100% carb snack. So people are having their little goldfish. They're having their organic, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's no calorie or healthy. So for snacks in general, I say 100% fruit, 100% protein, or in general, people should eat the plate model. But this is a new way to look at the plate model: protein first, protein forward. Only as much as you eat protein. So a quarter of every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Breakfast is the hardest. Quarter protein, only as much protein do you get carb. So if you do cereal or bagel, you can't have that cereal or bagel until you eat protein. And you only get as much cereal as you get protein. You only get as much bagel as you get protein. And so that could be scrambled eggs, however you want it done. I like to go to turkey, pepper turkey with fresh pepper to make it fancy. That's like my go-to. Or a handful of almonds. Only as much that do you get cereal. Only as much that do you get bagel.
Mm-hmm. Are there ways that you suggest or recommend to parents, if they are seeing their teen or tween not make some of those choices or do that? I have a lot of parents who will say, I'm on the edge of my seat watching them come downstairs at 10 or 11 at night and pouring a giant bowl of goldfish and going back upstairs, and they're not wanting to shame them. They're not wanting to inadvertently, lead towards an eating disorder or something where they feel badly about themselves. And at the same time, if night after night or day after day, they're watching them kind of grab that handful of Oreos at 11 p.m.,
right,
or eat the bagel and then a bowl of cereal on the way out the door. Do you have any thoughts about, ways that parents might be able to say something or not say something or have a discussion about that or something to do?
I think it's really, key. You can control the environment, right? For most part. Don't buy the goldfish. Don't buy the cereal. Only have enough for that occasion. My thing is, as an Asian American, watching TV shows where people are eating pints of ice cream. We never had ice cream in our house. We would only have ice cream if we went out to the ice cream shop and had a scoop, but then it was contained. I realized in retrospect, if you have a pint of ice cream in the house, that's deeply dangerous, right? If you have Costco size fish and chips or crackers or, whatever, then that's there and it's going to be there. The other part is adolescent medicine is really the kid has to take it on themselves, right? So I usually give them it's you, man. So I'm like, your mom is here, your dad is here, I'm here. We're all here to give you the tools to be healthy. And we as a family will promise to keep a healthy family environment. Lots of fruit available, lots of nuts available for you anytime. We like to have a fruit basket next to the kid wherever they're sitting.
It's good to remember that all of our health choices, all of our lifestyle choices, do have impact and certainly have impact over time. I'm going to just sort of as a roundup question, and again, I encourage people, if you missed last week's episode, to listen to our episode with Dr. Yen talking about making periods optional. We teased in that because you spoke a little bit about perimenopause and you spoke a lot about the birth control pill and the public health benefits of that for, all of us, but for adolescents in particular. With your goal, I think, of kind of making life easier and making life healthier for women, could you just share your thoughts? I think there's a lot of, in the world of social media, there's a lot of doctors saying, use HRT, don't use HRT. This is when it's right. Do it during perimenopause. Definitely don't do it during perimenopause. Wait until you're fully in menopause. Just your thoughts on your expertise with regard to hormone replacement therapy and perimenopause, because we have a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause listening to our show with adolescent and young adult children. And there's a lot of stress and a lot going on at that age range. So just what are your thoughts?
Yes. So it's really important for people to know that there was the Women's Health Initiative, and that was the largest study of 100,000 women. The problem is there were several problems with that research study. The average age of the woman in that research study was 63. And we now know the average age of menopause is 52. And we now know that you need to put the estrogen back before 10 years has lapsed. And so they took average 63, 10 years plus menopause, and gave them estrogen. And so to understand the biology of what happens in menopause at age 52 plus or minus 5 years on average, your body's like, thank you for your service, takes away your estrogen.
Right.
You go out to pasture. First thing that happens is our arteries become bad. They no longer dilate. They fill up with cholesterol. And so if you let that happen for 10 years and then you throw estrogen, which causes blood clots, you're going to get bad outcomes. The other thing with the Women's Health Initiative is there was like 20 really esteemed researchers. And so all of us assumed that they were doing things right. And 5 of them are like, pharma is evil and everybody's just getting estrogen and they're just doing it for money, blah, blah, blah. As soon as they got a whiff of something bad, they immediately had a press conference. In medicine, you do not have a press conference until your statistics have been checked by some peers and to make sure it's okay. They didn't. They just had that press conference and said, if we put you on estrogen and progesterone, you get breast cancer. And that scared everyone. But when they finally pulled the data, and my friend Marty Markary, who's the head of FDA, actually pulled the paper. And the confidence interval is, I believe, 0.86 to 1.93. If it crosses 1, then it means your risk of breast cancer on is the same as your risk of breast cancer off. And if you have 100,000 patients, you should be able to find something that's significant. It should not cross 1. It should totally be on one side or totally be on the other, and it crossed 1. So that means it was insignificant, but they went to press with that, scared everyone, and deprived 2 decades of women, my mother's generation, of estrogen. When your estrogen goes down, your risk of cardiac disease goes up double. Before menopause, our risk of heart attack compared to a guy is 50%. Once it takes away our estrogen, our risk is the same. Once you take away the estrogen, your bone density goes down drastically within 5 years. And so you can decrease our risk of fractures by 60% if everybody was to go on HRT. If everybody was to go on HRT, we could decrease hip fractures by 30%. Once you get a hip fracture, you have like a 1 in 3 chance of dying within 6 years. And quality of life. I saw my grandma go from really functional, strong matriarch to like wimpy, sad thing in bed, really kind of sad to see a woman taken down that way. 1 in 5 women, when they hit menopause, the hot flashes, the brain fog, it's worse than pregnancy brain. If you've had pregnancy brain, is demoralizing when you're a high-functioning physician or podcaster or PhD or whatever. That little bit makes you feel yuck. 1 in 5 women quit their job.
Yep. I've worked with women who have found it so frustrating, feel embarrassed at work, really struggle professionally during that time.
Exactly. And so when they actually looked at the research, there was one group that had only estrogen, because when you take out the uterus, you don't need to add progesterone. But if you add estrogen, then that stimulates the lining, and you got to put the progesterone to block endometrial uterine cancer. But those people had their uterus out, so they just got estrogen. The estrogen-only group had a decreased risk of breast cancer by 20%. And when they got breast cancer, they had a decrease in death from breast cancer by 40%. So the estrogen in HRT is not increasing your risk of breast cancer. So then we think it's possibly the synthetic progesterone. So in the Women's Health Initiative, they use medroxyprogesterone acetate, which we no longer use for HRT. We now use bioidentical micronized progesterone. And there has been no research showing increased risk of breast cancer compared to those who don't take micronized bioidentical progesterone. No increased risk of breast cancer. I talked to my breast cancer surgeon friends, and she's like, I totally see people who get breast cancer on HRT. And I was like, again, it has to be above the baseline. 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer on HRT and not on HRT. You have to see a greater increase on HRT to say that it is due to HRT. And ideally, a randomized clinical trial, because these two might have other factors that are different, blah, blah, blah. So,
But everything that you're highlighting there, Dr. Yen, is, a lot of what the mismessaging. That's, it's going to lead to breast cancer. Estrogen feeds cancer, and you're just saying quite the opposite, as long as you're, and certainly with regard to the progesterone, all progesterones aren't the same, in other words. And what we're dealing with now is an entirely different entity. So I think certainly we'd encourage anyone listening today to, speak with their doctor and see what they can learn. But it does sound like you see that as a really viable and helpful option for the symptoms you're describing, the brain fog, the night sweats, and the other health benefits, like potentially protecting yourself from osteopenia or, down the line.
Yes, the FDA approved reasons for HRT, and my company actually does do HRT now, Pandia Health, is hot flashes, night sweats, genitourinary symptoms, and this is recurrent urinary tract infections or feeling like you need to pee when you don't need to pee. And then the genital symptoms is what I call sandpaper vagina, painful sex, dry situation. And then the last one is at risk for osteoporosis. So if you're a small framed Caucasian woman, you are at risk of osteoporosis. If any of your mom and aunties and grandmas, more closer than farther away, had osteoporosis, then you are at risk of osteoporosis. And then lastly, my joke is, as an ethnic minority, we never have a leg up in medicine because it's all based on a Caucasian female or Caucasian male. Most of us are lactose intolerant. That is risk for osteoporosis if you aren't getting enough calcium in your diet. So those are the 4 FDA approved reasons. It has all these other side benefits, and we need FDA and government or societies to say we can use this for cardiac prevention, because the number one killer of all women is heart disease. The number one killer of a breast cancer survivor, heart disease. And so you got to weigh slight increased risk of breast cancer versus the cardiac benefits. And certainly if you have breast cancer that's estrogen sensitive, no estrogen for you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yep. Of course.
And that's the nuanced part of that, in consultation with your individual doctor who knows your healthcare. I just want to say to you, Dr. I have so appreciated last week's conversation, this conversation, because I think there is this discussion of HRT and also the discussion of hashtags periods optional. I think there's so much, at least in my experience growing up, and I think a number of women I know, and certainly my sisters and I have talked about this, and in reflecting upon remembering my mom going through menopause, that there's kind of this accepted, like, this is just what you deal with. So you have terrible cramps, you feel sick, you feel awful, you're worried you're going to have a period at school and be embarrassed. That's part of being a young woman. So congratulations.
Right.
And then you grow up, and then pregnancy and all of that goes along with it. And like, yay for you, you had a baby. So that's what you get. And then, you get into raising your kids in the teenage years and you start perimenopause and menopause. And it's like, now deal with that. And I just have found this conversation so refreshing, because so much of what you're saying is we have ways that we can help you deal with that. And so you don't just have to accept, like, now this is my new phase of misery that I have to walk through life with and continue to look like a normal person out there in the world. Yeah. Like, there's actually science and medicine and a lot of things that we can do to improve the lives of people with a uterus.
And sort of adding on to that, I would invite you, Dr. Yen, to just share with people who are listening, if they want to find you, if they want to learn more about your Pandia Health, how do they do that? Where can they find you if they, want further consultation with you or a colleague?
Yes. So Pandia Health is on all the socials, and the key is how to spell it. We chose Pandia, the Greek goddess of healing, light, full moon, because we're all about women's empowerment. And then everybody's like, Panda Health? And I'm like, no, Pandia Health. So I made up the definition. Pan is every, and dia is day. So that's how you spell Pandia. Pandia Health. We are on TikTok. We are on Insta. We are on Facebook. We have lots of great videos on YouTube, and some of it's hidden. So make sure you watch the lives, because that's where more of our menopause content is. We started off with birth control. And then when I hit menopause, I was like, I will find the best treatment and I will give it to everybody. And so we've now launched Menopause. And then just as an aside, 2 points, perimenopause, your hormones are chaos. And so we've educated people, you want bioidentical estrogen and progesterone, but during chaos, you want to take it over and just smooth it out. And so a lot of people went off the birth control pill because their husband got a vasectomy or they got their tubes tied or they just don't have sex as much anymore. But in perimenopause, you may want to go back on the pill or the continuous vaginal ring to just smooth that sucker out. And then when you're 52, 53, be like, am I there yet? Am I there yet? And if you're there, then switch over to the bioidentical HRT, which is FDA approved and tested. But know that bioidentical does not equal compounded. If someone's trying to sell you compounded, they're trying to sell you compounded because compounded costs more and compounded expires faster. There's really no need for compounded. There's many different doses of estrogen and 2 doses of progesterone that are generally good enough for most people.
Wonderful. This is so very helpful and clarifying. And I think you just reiterated something I've heard, about perimenopause, that maybe that isn't the time for HRT. Maybe it's at menopause. And you just explained that beautifully. So thank you. And I know our listeners thank you.
So please, everyone, go check out Pandia Health. And watch Dr. Yen's TEDx talk, which is truly excellent. And if you didn't listen to last week's episode, go back and listen to that. And please share this or rate and review. It helps this information get out to more people. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Dr. Yen, for being here with us again. We really appreciate this.
We really do.
Thank you for having me.